to dominate at the plate, Blast Baseball is trusted by more MLB and college teams than any other hitting solution. The Blast sensor attaches to the knob of any bat, providing real-time feedback with every swing. Go to blastmotion.com and enter code LIVE at checkout to save $10.
All right, we are here with Beyond Baseball Season 2. As you heard from Caleb and the ad read, we are now brought to you by Blast Baseball, as Prospects Live is now sponsored by Blast. So we are excited to launch into Season 2. We have an incredible slate of guests for you coming up. But Caleb, how are you doing today?
I'm good. We timed this perfectly for the opening day of Major League Baseball, and I think it's an exciting one for us taking the heels and the momentum from the WBC and going into this opening day. I feel like a lot of people are excited about baseball, and for good measure.
Yeah, I mean, the WBC was incredible. We saw like a lot of the viral clips that came out of that. They were some of the most viewed clips in baseball over World Series games and things like that. So it was awesome to see that Japan pulled it off, got the W, got the championship. U.S. came in second. Really close game, but ended with one of the most iconic at bats ever, where you had Shohei Ohtani versus Mike Trout. I mean, absolutely incredible. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a few Homer biased thoughts because there were a lot of Phillies on that WBC team, and Trey Turner became Captain America / Trey for president during that last couple weeks, I think. But the way I feel in terms of the environment was it was a playoff atmosphere, and now we're going into opening day. And usually that's how we end the baseball season. Then we try to build that back up for opening day. And it's just so cool to be able to see that. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the iconic at bat. It's always, in my opinion, easier to be on the pitcher's end there. And we saw exactly why. I don't know how anybody ever approaches a Shohei at bat with 100 in, 100 over the plate, and then 87 away. I know it wasn't that exact sequence, but it's just when you see it's 100 and then just hits you with that slider away, it's just nasty.
He threw 102 to the backstop, and it was like paints a slider on the outside corner. What do you? The best hitter is even Mike Trout. Like, what do you do with that? There's nothing that you can do with that.
Not to mention that the guy had more innings pitched than any other WBC pitcher. Also hit. I think he led in hits, runs, walks. I might be wrong over there, but the guy's just tremendous, and he continues to outdo himself. And I've said this over and over again to anybody who would listen. If he was playing basketball, he would be bigger than LeBron. Yeah. And I think that the world is starting to see that now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a tweet the other day that looked at like Randy Arozarena, Shohei Ohtani, Lars Nootbaar, like all these guys following on Instagram before the WBC versus after. Yeah. And just like they quadrupled basically their following that they had. And so it's like just seeing baseball at that international stage and the passion that other countries really have for the game and just how it's growing. I mean, you think about when the WBC was first introduced in 2006, like everyone was like, kind of cool. MLB's trying to do this thing. And then like the next couple WBCs, everybody was like, not interested. And then 2017, when the U.S. won, it seems like that's when it really picked up again. But this WBC in 2023, I feel like is the most I've seen fans interested in the WBC. And I think that's a good sign for going forward.
It is. I'm excited to see what it looks like on opening day just because of all the momentum we have, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, so if you guys all missed it in the Prospects Live Patreon, I was doing the daily sheet for the World Baseball Classic. So check that out if you want to see some write-ups on some of the players. Japan, of course, loaded with a bunch of arms with flawless mechanics. Apparently that's what they teach in Japan. Every pitcher has flawless mechanics, beautiful on the mound, and a bunch of potential MLB talent there. So it was awesome to see. We're getting ready for opening day. Do you have any predictions for opening day?
Before I get into that, I'll say Roki Sasaki. I hope that's how you say his name.
Insane.
I think the hype is real, and I think it's going to soon hit. I know he has 4 years before he's able to kind of post to go Major League. So my predictions, I mean, are we going teams? Are we going players here? I'm definitely homer pick pulling for the Phillies to take the NL. It's really hard to not pick the Astros out of the AL. I don't want to see that happen, especially with the news of Altuve. I think it's going to be a little rocky in the beginning, but I do think they are the favorite. I think if I had to pick some sleeper picks, I mean, I think the Orioles could
Hmm.
actually surprise some people in the
Make some
AL
noise.
East. I think the NL Central will be a little interesting. It looks like there's always one team that contends every year, but I think that we might see either surprise teams or just a little bit more competitive. And then I think the Dodgers are going to compete. I know NL East is always the one that gets, there's so much competition there. It's
Yeah.
going to be the Braves, it's going to be the Mets, it's going to be the Phillies, but I'm pulling for my homer pick right there.
Yeah, I mean the NL East is stacked. It sucks to see Reese Hoskins go down with ACL
Yeah,
tear, which kind of hurts. I mean, you got Bryce Harper who had to get Tommy John, so they're a little banged up. But Bryce should be back in May. Like, sounds like they're hoping for May. I mean, the Phillies are going to be stacked. That lineup with Trey Turner at the top. I mean, Trey Turner was Captain America basically during the
yeah.
entire WBC, so they're going to be loaded. As an AL Central fan, just because of the Kansas City Royals, I think the White Sox are going to make a little bit more noise than expected.
I agree.
Just because they got a new manager, got some new kind of blood in the coaching staff, and I think that's going to really help kind of turn that clubhouse environment around.
Healthy. You're hearing guys
Yeah,
losing weight, getting in the best shape of their life, like usual.
yeah, they got a bunch of guys that are ready to go. The health was the issue with like Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert on that team, so hopefully they make some turnarounds there. But speaking of the White Sox, our guest this week is third baseman for the Chicago White Sox, Jake Berger. He has an incredible story that he really opens up into. He talks about how he was diagnosed with PTSD and now how that's kind of turned into him raising awareness for mental health. So it's really like in-depth, deep discussion about mental health, not just in baseball, but outside of the game as well. So really looking forward to sharing that with you all. I know, Caleb, you might not have a chance to listen to any of it, but I know you know his story. So what do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Jake had a lot of hype around him and his name coming into the league, and I think it's always interesting to hear a player's perspective after the hype is kind of like sizzled. But you are still the person, you are still the human being that's going through this, and there are ways that you have to combat. And we talk about coping strategies a lot. I think what you just mentioned in terms of what has kind of been in front of him in his path, it's going to be interesting to hear exactly how he's coped with it and how he continues to kind of battle those bad days, good days, and also the demons that are in front of them. But I think that the thing that we always get from our guests is the understanding that they are a baseball player and they're able to take a lot of this, what we call, there's a lot of failure in it, the 3 for 10 kind of mentality into life, and staying with the good days and understanding that it's a process and a journey that you're all on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to kind of segue. And Jay created Burger Bomb too, which was a community that he created around mental health, sports. It's a website. He's looking to launch a podcast along with it, but he has it as like an open door communication. So anybody who might be going through some of the same things that he does, he wants them to reach out to him, and he tries to respond to like even just normal fans, just because he knows sometimes you just need someone to hear you out or someone to listen. And so I think that's going to be incredible thing that most people will get out of this podcast interview. So, without further ado, we want to bring you to that interview with Jake Berger. All right, welcome to another episode of Beyond Baseball by Prospects Live. I'm here. I usually have my co-host, Dr. Caleb Ezzi, but he's out today. But we have an incredible guest, Jake Berger, third baseman with the Chicago White Sox. Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we were really excited to have you on, just because your story is so incredible, and the kind of person you are as a human being is just an awesome one. But just for the viewers who don't know you, just go ahead and kind of share your story, how you kind of got to where you are in professional baseball, some of the things that you kind of gone through yourself.
Yeah, so played at Missouri State University down in Springfield, Missouri for 3 years. In 2017, I was drafted in the first round by the Chicago White Sox. And played a half season that year in low A, and then the following year in 2018, big league spring training, like the fourth game in, I tore my Achilles, and then ended up actually re-tearing it throughout the rehab process about 10 weeks into it, and yeah, it was kind of a long journey with a lot of mental health battles that I had to work through, and still working through. And then go to 2020. It's actually going to be my first year, and then obviously, COVID unfortunately happens, and lose another season. And actually, kind of it was kind of a blessing in disguise personally for me. I was able to get back home with my family and kind of work through some of those mental health battles I was talking about. And I'll go into more depth in a little bit, but actually gave me kind of a mental reset,
Mm.
and actually played in a collegiate, kind of like a collegiate with a couple pro guys in it, in a league that was kind of just set at one field, 7 inning games, just some sort of organized baseball. That was actually my first time back in like 1,000 days or something like that since
Wow.
being in an organized type of a game. And then went to the alternate site that year, and then the following year broke camp with AAA Charlotte, and ended up making my debut in 2021.
Wow, that's awesome. I have a couple questions just kind of building off of that
Yeah,
because you touched on some things that are really cool. But the first one is talk about dealing with the injuries and kind of going through some of those mental battles, and then kind of talked about the importance of your family. And I think that's something I've heard a lot from players. And when they're going
mhm.
through these battles, whether it's injuries, whether it's something really physically, mental health, the one thing is having that support group around them. So kind of dive into that. What did having that support group around kind of do for you and help you kind of push through some of those moments?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough, when you're going through an injury like that. There's not many people that have gone through it. In baseball, you're used to the Tommy John.
Hmm.
You're tearing your UCL. You have a lot of guys that have had that. Whereas in Achilles, it's not really that much of a baseball injury. You see it in football and basketball a lot, but even then, like the statistics aren't that high of Achilles tears. So you kind of feel like you're kind of out on an island by yourself, not really sure how to navigate this. The guys you're rehabbing with every single day, or either it's something along the lines of like a broken hamate in the wrist, or like I said, a torn UCL. So you kind of feel alone. You don't really have that support group. And when you're dealing with stuff, like for me, I actually got diagnosed clinically with PTSD. When I first got diagnosed, it's like I thought that only happened to guys in the military. People that have seen war, and have shells going off around them. Whatever it may be. And for me, it was like that. There's no way. Like there's
Yeah.
no way I'm getting diagnosed with PTSD. And there were a lot of nights where I'm laying in bed, and I kind of like freeze up, and like I can't move out of my bed because I'm reliving the Achilles tear. And so when that starts to happen, I start to you push away family and friends, and I realize now that that's not the right route to go. But when you're in the moment, it seems like these people aren't going to understand me anyway. So why even open up about what I'm dealing with? So eventually, I think it was 2019. There was a moment where I went over to England. Big Premier League soccer fan. Went to a couple games over there with some teammates, and I was walking a lot of my Achilles, and I'm like, you know what, this like my Achilles actually feels pretty good walking 8 miles a day.
Yeah.
And I had two of my best friends over there, Jimmy Lambert, who's with the White Sox currently, and then Ryan Burr. And I started kind of opening up about my story then with them, and they had both been injured, so they understood a little bit. And then I get back, and I go back to square one where I'm by myself, and don't feel that community feel. And I sat my mom down. We went to Witch, and I'm like, hey, look, like I'm really considering quitting right now. Like I don't want to do this anymore. And she said, look, like don't go through life and regret things. And my dad echoed that as well when I told him as well. And then 3 months later, 4 months later, the pandemic happens. I go back home, and having that community feel with my family back home, it kind of brought me back to my days of, this isn't a job. This is
Yeah.
this is fun. I'm playing a game. And if I have my mom and dad right next to me, and my sister as well, everything's going to be okay. So that kind of gave me that it kind of unlocked something in me where, what, like, this is supposed to be fun. Like, let's have fun with it. And I started playing tennis every day. I started swimming, and walking, and just stuff that we could do at the time. And got myself back into baseball shape. And so, like, having them, I mean, that was the most pivotal point of this entire process, was during those 4 months back home with my family.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible because you touched on something. So we interviewed Brewer Hicklin with the Kansas City Royals one time,
Mhm.
and he kind of went through some similar struggles, wrote about it, and he said when I started separating my performances on the field from like my everyday life, he's like,
Mhm.
I just started remembering everybody who loves you still loves you no matter what you do at the end of the day
Exactly.
on the field, and so I
Yep.
think that's awesome. The other thing you really touched on that I liked when you talked about that sense of community. It's just so important because I think a lot of people have it lost. You get kind of inundated with social media and you kind of get
Mhm.
into your own zones, and it's really hard to go out and really find that sense of community. The one thing I really love that you're doing is you created Burger Bombs,
Mhm.
which is I'll let you kind of go through the acronyms if you want, but you have a content based website that's focusing on mental health. And you've also posted on your social media like, hey, is anybody struggling? Please reach out to me. Let me know
Mhm.
how you can help. Because I think you've taken those experiences that you have with lack of community, and now you're trying to really give back to others. And so, kind of go into that a little bit, how it's helped not only helping others, but it's probably helping you in some sense.
Yeah. So before I go into the bombs, what I want to touch on that you said is, like, when I told my story, right? Like, I I tweeted it out. I think it was like March 13th or something like that, 2020. And I hadn't been talking on social media as much. I just wanted to share my story because, like, I wanted people to know what I was dealing with, and also on the flip side, like, there's somebody out there that's struggling as well.
Mm.
And I wanted that to be known to people, like, hey, look, like, you're not the only one going through something. And, if I help one person out there, I think that's a win for me. And so then I kind of started forming this Burger Bomb stuff, and the acronyms are kind of stuff that I use personally to get me through a lot of stuff, and I still use it. I think the thing about, like, mental health is it's a never ending battle.
Yeah.
You can't just defeat it in one day and it's over. It's a I kind of classify it as an enemy that's always there, always lurking, and you got to stay on top of it to really control it. And so the Burger Bombs, B of the bombs acronym is be open. Kind of what we touched on already, where you have to open up. It's going to do you good. You're going to be so surprised with the friends and family if you do talk about your story. Like, hey, like, I dealt with that 10 years ago. I deal with that now, or I know somebody, one of my best friends is dealing with that. There's so many people out there struggling that I think that's pivotal. And it also makes you feel like, hey, like, I'm not carrying this burden alone.
Yeah.
I have somebody to support me and help me. If I'm dealing with really bad anxiety that day, I have somebody that I can talk to about that. O is open a book. You touched
Mhm.
on the social media and the technology side of things in this world, and there's a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of negatives with it. And for me, opening a book is kind of a safe space. You're away from the social media, you're away from the instant gratification of seeing, posting something, getting likes on it, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. You get away from that instant gratification, and it's a form of meditation as well. And you can learn something. I mean, it doesn't have to be informational. It could be fiction, nonfiction, whatever you want it to be, whatever you're interested in. But for me, I love nonfiction books. I love learning about stuff. It takes me away from just going on a website and googling. I'm actually putting in work and
Yeah.
taking notes and stuff. And then the M is meditation. I use that all the time on the field. If I make an error, or I swing at a bad pitch, it's really focused on my breath work and kind of slowing down the game, but also outside of it, when I'm really feeling anxious, or I have going into spring training, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm trying to compete for a job. You're gonna feel those anxious feelings, and so I think meditation is a great way to control that. And I think everybody should look into it. Both the mindfulness and breath work are huge. And then the next B is break a sweat. For me, kind of talked about it when I was back home during quarantine. I think getting outside and doing something, for me, it's hiking or going on a walk outdoors. I think it kind of gives you perspective on, how big this world is, and, like, there's so many people out there that are probably dealing with something, and so
Yeah.
going outside, seeing how beautiful nature is, getting outside of the computer screen and stuck in your house, I think that does wonders for I don't know, like the medical terminology with the endorphins in your
Yeah.
brain, but I know there's a lot of studies about that. And then S is set a routine. For me, like I would have my huge rehab day. I'd be going to bed and it's like, oh my god, like I have this, and then I have to go, do some sort of rehab in the training room, and then now I have to go to mobility, and now I have to go to strength training, and it just like piles up, and you have this long list. It's like, damn, I don't know if my Achilles is going to make it through
Yeah.
this. And so what I started doing was setting a routine the night before. So I'd write down, all right, from this time to this time, I'm going to do this. And then I laid out literally my entire day, like even down to like lunch and when I'm going to brush my teeth and like just the small nuances. And for me, it's like, it gave my like, it kind of calmed my brain where it's like, okay, like step one's down, like from 7 to 7:01, I'm brushing my teeth. That's a win, right? You're
Yeah.
taking that as a small victory. And like for me, like setting that routine kind of eased everything where it's like, okay, one step at a time, rather than looking at the next day as like this massive hill to climb. It's like just keep getting the small wins, and then by the end of the day, you're gonna come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because you think about when we think trying to shift our perspectives in life, like constantly, we all want to hit that end goal. We all want to obtain that end goal, but we forget about the little victories that we have along the way. So it sounds like having those routines and like being like, "Hey, I get to check this off my list today." It's
Exactly.
perfect. It gets you kind of moving to the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah, it's always been huge for me. It's like, I mean, baseball's hard enough. Like for
Yeah,
me, it's like,
yeah,
hey, like I got a really good lift in today, and like I really kind of touched on something I needed to work on. It's like keep getting those small wins, and like by the end of it, if you're process oriented rather than result oriented, the results are going to be where you want them to be if you keep hitting on that process.
yeah. I love that. So the one thing that really kind of stuck out to me too is like you've gone through a lot of this adversity. It's awesome to see kind of how open you are, and you're using it as a way to a tool to help others, which is incredible. Talk about that time, just kind of going back to the baseball side when you made your major league debut. Thinking about like all that you had to go through in order to get there, right? Being a first round pick, kind of going through a lot of the struggles with everybody on social media saying whether you're a failure or not a failure because you've done X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z, or hasn't been. It gets crazy on
Oh
the
yeah.
Twitters and everything else like that. Talk about like once you powered through all that adversity, what was that moment like when you finally made that major league debut?
Yeah, I mean, it was it was emotional. I think Jason Benetti gave me a post game interview, and like I was kind of I was in tears, and it's
Yeah.
like just everything I've gone through, and like all the support and like everything, it just meant the world to me. It's hard to like when you first have that injury, it's hard to like see that happening,
Hmm.
and like after all the hours and everything I put into it, it was super special for me. But I think it was like for my parents probably even more special, just because like as a parent you see the worst side of things and the best side of things, and it's I think they were even more ecstatic than I was. But yeah, I mean, for me, like just going through that and then like getting to the pinnacle of where I've been working towards. There's really like I can't even put words to it. I can't really explain that feeling. Because if I didn't go through that adversity, I think obviously I'd still feel special about it,
Yeah.
but the adversity just makes it all the better. And it's like I'm still writing my story too. That's how I look at it now. It's like there's still so much to do, and that
Yeah.
excites me a lot.
Yeah, and you're early enough in your career too, where you got the whole world in front of you. So
Hmm.
even post career, whenever that happens in like 10,
Exactly.
15 years, things like that. Kind of diving before I dive into kind of one of the last questions, the one thing I always am curious about because I think as someone who's wrote and analyzed players and things like that, it's hard to separate yourself from like the words people are saying on the internet and stuff like that. And you can dive into this as much as you want. But what are some of the tools and resources that you put in place for yourself to help you kind of separate from what other people are saying about you, all the other external noise that's out there?
Yeah, so like I love being on social media and I love interacting with fans. This year I decided to just like delete Twitter for the
Mm,
season. Like, hey, I'm gonna interact and be my normal self in the off season, but like during the season, like I'm gonna hone in on what I'm doing. I think some guys balance it differently. For me, that worked because it's not just the negative side; it's
yeah,
also the positive side, right? Like, you know, for me, it's like, okay, if you look at social media, say Twitter, for example, like most of it, it's like 95% positive and like 5% negative. And
yeah,
obviously, those 5% are pretty loud when they do say it, but like that positive is toxic as well because these fans are trying to support you and be very kind, but it's also like your ego yourself. Like you don't want to hype yourself up by
yeah,
reading it, and then it's like, okay, I just went 4 for 4 with 2 bombs the night before, and it's like
yeah,
all these great things, and then it's like the next day you go 0 for 4. So it's like,
yeah,
for me, I think just kind of shutting that out was huge. Not reading into anything that people are saying about me. And like, you have to tell your friends and family to not like tell you too, because they're on social media as well, and they don't have like
yeah,
the direct messages coming at you. But it's definitely a tough balance because I really do love interacting with fans, and for me, like, I'd prefer the human to human interactions. So when I'm at the field and on the field, I try and interact with as many fans as I can to keep that going and keep that that a two-way street. But yeah, with social media, I mean, it's tough. I mean, some guys do it better than others,
yeah.
but like I said, like the positives are just as bad as the negatives when it comes to kind of how you're taking your day by day in season.
Yeah, and I'm sure of like the moments too, like not even the positive or negatives, but I'm sure there's fans out there who like have heard your story and were like, "Oh, I really resonate with this. I need to reach out to this guy and like tell
Yeah,
him how awesome, like for him for doing this, how it helped me." And I'm sure you want to keep the door open for having those stories because it
exactly.
helps you as much as it helps them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like always been the struggle with it. Is like I do want to help as many people as I can
Yeah,
out there. So that's why I do keep the door open through Instagram and stuff like that. But Twitter is just such a different world with
yeah,
you get however many characters to say something to somebody rather than
yeah.
having to go through a direct message. So I always leave the door open through Instagram, Twitter off season. Like I'll interact with whoever. It's just it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. So kind of going into the last question. So Caleb and I, when we started this podcast, one of our main goals was we want to show the human side stories to fans and really bring into a new picture of what baseball is and the players behind it. But we also wanted to be able to provide a resource to future players who might be going through some of the same things that you are. So if you had that one piece of advice for someone who might be going through some of the same mental battles that you're going through or some of the same
Mhm.
injury battles that you were going through, what would that one piece of advice be?
Reach out to anybody. Like for me, like it was my family. Also opened up with my friends later about it, but for me, it was my family. It can be anybody. I mean, I think MLB is heading in the right direction
Yeah.
with mental health stuff. I think over the last 5 years, you've seen a lot of progressive ideas in terms of mental health and having avenues for players to kind of open up about it. We have a mental skills coach
Yeah.
throughout the entire organization, and then you also have psychologists both at the big league level and the minor league level. So those resources are awesome. For me, I didn't feel as comfortable talking to the team uh, psychologist. So I use my parents,
Mm.
and I always say like opening up to even a therapist. If you don't feel comfortable sharing with your friends and family, I mean, a therapist I think is definitely worth it. And work through some of the stuff you're going through. So there's a lot of avenues to open up about it, and I think that's why in the burger bombs, like be open is number one. I
Yeah.
think that above all else, if you're not going to use the other four, fine, but be open. Like that's the one piece of advice is open up about it because you're not alone, and there's so many people out there struggling, and a lot of people that can kind of bounce ideas off of you, and kind of give you maybe what they use to get through it, or just be an avenue for each other. If you're dealing with something.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. I think that's a great way to wrap up. But before we close and kind of finish things off, where can anybody find the information about Burger Bombs and all the things that you're doing around mental health awareness, so they just know where those resources are?
Yeah, so Jake Burger 30 on Twitter and Instagram. It's not my personal one, but for this, I think it was important for me to separate it. And then jakeburger30.com is the website. So yeah, it's moving along.
Yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough for joining us. I mean, this has been just such an incredible interview. And your openness about your story and your journey, and I think so many people are going to learn from it and just be able to use it as a resource. And again, we can't thank you enough for joining us, and we're wishing you nothing but the best this coming season.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. I appreciate it.